Good evening and welcome to the second episode of Bantaba. I am Christina, your anchor. Last week we took a dive into the situation of education in Africa. It was a mind blowing and great conversation, and this time it won't be any different. I hope we are ready for the guest input today. Before I introduce you to our guests, I must say in today's episode, you will definitely learn about things you never knew existed. How good is your history? Well, you're about to find out. At the end of this episode, you will have a brief understanding of how things were before colonialism and after. We are pleased to have spirited and passionate servants from Far Eastern Federal University among us today. Their passion towards the development of African community in Vladivostok has become a foundation for the unity and advancement of this community. With their constant sacrifices and selflessness, they have once again come forward to enlighten and educate us on the resilience and strength of Africa. It is with great pleasure that I welcome our first guest from Zambia, a student of medical biophysics, Desmond.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Also from Gambia, a master's student of international relations, Peter.
Thanks, Bob.
From Ghana, a postgraduate student of hygiene and a part-time lecturer, Sneha.
Thank you for having me here.
So we are going to do a brief introduction of the topic. Today we have a very important topic. Why, what political governance system is suitable for Africa? Perhaps a monarchy, a republic, a democracy, a socialist state, or even a totalitarian state. This is what our guests have to deliberate on today. So to lay the groundwork, some African countries have experienced seven coup d'etats within the past 7 years. Mali, Guinea, Gabon, to name a few. One of the underlying questions is democracy suitable for Africa? But before we go there and also talk about other systems of government, let us visit our history first. So the first question would be, what governance systems existed in Africa before colonialism? How were Africans living in various political entities? Can you please give an overview of that, Desmond, if you would?
Ah, I was not expecting to be the first one to speak, but
So let me just rephrase the first question.
Yeah.
Okay. What governance systems existed in Africa before colonialism?
before colonialism, I think we had the monarchy system where we had chiefs, we had kings, and yeah, I think basically before colonialism it was monarchy.
Okay. All right. And how were Africans living in different political entities? For instance, if we are to look at different African countries, we can't specifically say every country had monarchy as the governing system. So if we talk about Zambia, was it monarchy at that time?
Well, with Africa, I think the first thing that we have to understand is we did not have the whole ideology of a state. So the leadership system was brought down to the levels of tribes and clans. So you start from the tribes, you go to the clans, you had the elders, the community, and things like that. So I feel like that was the overview of the leadership system that we had. So if I say monarchy, monarchy came about close to colonialism. That's when we had that, like we would have kings that would be in charge of different tribes and everything together. But if we go way back before that, it was basically tribes, clans, and small communities, and you'd have the elders that would sit down and uh, basically be the leadership.
Oh, right. Peter, if you would like to add something to that.
Well, yeah, I think Desmond is right in saying that in Africa, monarchy, the system of monarchy existed. Of course, it did, like in the Mali Empire, for example. We used to, Africa actually, first of all, you have to divide it into regions. Like we have 5 different regions, right? In each of these regions, I believe, had their separate political systems. kingdoms, and then you have principalities, right? So some of these kingdoms, of course, the king, actually the monarch, wields more power, right? But there are also in some systems like the Yoruba, for example, where it is kind of semi-centralized, not like it's in one, not like power is in the hands of one person, but actually it's distributed to the chiefs also. I believe in Ashanti, also Ghana, also had a similar system. But there are also stateless societies, because if my memory serves me well, even in Somalia, for example, they used to have stateless societies, meaning people just live without a state, like without a government to govern them, but they govern themselves. I'm not sure that can exist today though, but it existed and Africans lived peacefully. But again, I believe the the main system, the major was monarchy, but monarchy in the sense that there are people, for example, the chief priests, because African monarchism is not like it's God ordained. So the person is ordained by, let's say, okay, back then it was the gods, right? The gods ordained this person, and then when that person does anything, or if there's anything that is supposed to happen, the chief priests are supposed to be consulted. If anything, maybe the wrath of the gods can fall on the monarch if he or she kind of abuses his or her power. Yeah. So basically, I think that's one of the major systems that existed for colonialism.
Thank you. Moving on to the next. This has to do with a little bit of history. So I'm just going to read it out loud and then answer my question. About the Cuba Kingdom in 17th to 19th centuries in Central Africa. So according to some Harvard scholars and one Chicago scholar apparently, like Sarah Lois Nathan, they published an article in 2015 titled The Evolution of Culture and Institutions, Evident from the Cuba Kingdom. For instance, they found that the Cuba state in Central Africa created a trial by jury system without outside influence. So basically, everything was decided within the jury. There was no external factors contributing to that. So they also stated that there was a functioning police system, a military, and a central government. So now the question is, can the Cuba Kingdom or the Ashanti Kingdom in Ghana, can they be a system of checks and balance on political power? Can they be to Africa what Greece and Rome are to Western civilization? So would you like to answer that?
Yeah, thank you. So, if I got your question right, for example, if you bring the Ashanti Kingdom, obviously the kingdom does not operate in a democratic, what you call it, space, because it is a kingdom. And as a kingdom, we have a king whom, as Peter said, is ordained by the gods. And except that in our system, the kingdom is being run by a certain family, right? So that family, we appoint when the king passes away, then another king is gonna be installed. But then also, let's remind ourselves that although it is a kingdom, it is possible for a kingdom to operate some aspects of democracy, right? Because democracy actually is not just about elections, but it is about, for me, any system that ensures the rights and the rights of the individuals, and any system that ensures participation of the individuals in the decision making process of that particular jurisdiction. So it is possible for the Ashanti Kingdom, as you said, to continue to exist and be strong, and still whilst maintaining their traditional and cultural values, and also ensuring that the people that the kingdom governs, at least have some degree of voice, where they can voice out freely their concerns to the king. I don't know if I answered your question.
Thank you.
I think, in fact, to add to that, I once come across this article actually describing how it was like in Ghana, particularly the Ashanti Kingdom, where the king or the queen can be removed from power by the people if he or she does certain things that are right. So I think that's a vivid example of a system of checks and balances, like when we're talking about aspects of democracy that had existed back then. But although we did not have the word, but the concept existed, right? And we had people like advisors to the king that the king would consult before making decisions. In most cases, I would say. Of course, sometimes you would find kings that would abuse their power and use it like it's a one man rule. But all in all, there were systems, in place, mechanisms in place to make sure that the monarch does not abuse his or her power.
Okay, moving on to the next question. Can Africa's political system have evolved from its prehistory empires, or is it too late to turn back? Basically, my question is, looking at the history of African countries and the way we were before colonialism, our governance system, is there a way that we could bring that back into existence, or it is too late?
Yeah, frankly speaking, I think that the kind of democracy we are practicing in Africa compared to what was in previous years, for me, I like it. Except that, like you said, this kind of democracy that we have taken upon ourselves has also kind of led to diminishing values, the African values, because democracy says everybody should have the right to talk. And we have that African value where we respect each other, especially elders, and you would dare not in those days speak up against an adult. Of course you may challenge his views, but these days it's becoming more disrespectful than just expressing your views. So I think for me that is the only thing that's perhaps is a positive side of the pre-colonial system of governance in most of the African countries. And then also in those times, because the king had a lot of powers, you dare not be corrupt. You see, because the whole system of democracy creates a lot of processes for fighting corruption, so that even sometimes by the time that the case is finally judged in court, a whole lot of things have happened, and the cases will get thrown away. You see, so that is it. Fighting corruption and the respect for people, the authentic African values. Those are the things that I think perhaps were much better in the pre-democratic era of Africa.
Thank you. My next question goes to this now. Has Africa lost the ability to think and come up with its own political system? And are there internal and external factors contributing to the development?
If I understand your question, it's about the leadership system.
Yeah.
Have we lost the ability to think in terms of the leadership system?
Even outside the leadership, the kind of governance we want to adopt.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have the capability, right, to come up with this, to bring this back into existence?
Well, I don't really understand what you mean by bringing that system back into existence.
Let me just say,
what particular type of system, like the democratic system or the...
We didn't have democratic system before, so we are using democratic systems now, right? So when maybe my first question should be, when democracy was brought into Africa, did we really have a choice?
Well, I think to answer your question properly, I have to go a little bit.
You can take your time.
Thank you. All right. So to understand the whole concept of democracy coming into Africa, we have to go back to the days before slavery. So when we understand what Africa went through before slavery, we will have a clear understanding of how democracy was introduced to Africa. So during slavery, the whole African population, like the whole of Africa, 18 million people were affected by slavery, 12 million were displaced, 1 million people died while trying to be carried away into Europe and other things. But after that experience of slavery, we now had colonialism. So when we went through that dark age of colonialism, and then we had what I call the prophets. We had the prophets coming up, Kwame Nkrumah, Kenneth Kaunda, Madiba in South Africa, and all of that. These guys did not have a clear picture of what democracy should be. I believe democracy it should be divided into three what I would say aspects. The first one is behavior, the second one is the norms, the third one is institutions. But then when these guys got the independence, they were nationalists. They had that spirit of emancipation. So with that kind of spirit, it was very hard for them to build institutions. It was very hard for them to go for behavior. It was very hard for them to build societal norms that would actually represent democracy. So what we had now after colonialism is not democracy. We had maybe democratization, in other words. So it's like after 1990, we saw the West now trying to push the concept of democracy on all these countries and these things, and we've seen that keep going, and then, like it's a question that has to be addressed, because Africa hasn't yet experienced the real meaning of democracy. We have what we call a picture or a cosmetic figure of democracy.
Yeah, I think interesting though. You know, the colonialists brought in this idea, but when you look at it in practice, they themselves were not democratic in relation to us. You know, they colonized us, denied us all the rules which should actually exist in a democracy. We ourselves did not have our people to represent us in parliament. That only started coming up like in the 1940s, in the 1950s, you get it. We have our Gambian, first Gambian to be in parliament, Edward Francis Small, who came up with a slogan, no taxation without representation. Because we didn't, Gambian people don't have anyone. It was the British that were actually ruling, you know, their colonies, but they call themselves democracies. But we don't, it's not democratic in the Gambia at the time. So they did not actually prepare us also. They did not prepare our leaders, like Kwame Nkrumah and the others. Although Nkrumah was educated in the UK, but still, Nkrumah and his colleagues, most of them in Africa, were not prepared. Even in Nigeria, people were not prepared. Like, how can you have, when Nigeria gained independence, it was only 15% of Nigerians that were in the civil service. And then they just left the country like that. So how do you expect that 50% to manage those millions of people? So that was why when these people came, most of them became dictators. Because we never had that existing. Those institutions never existed. They were not trained like in that kind of leadership style. And again, the Cold War also influenced their leadership, because at that time, you know, the US was in a Cold War with the Soviet Union. So all of them actually, democracy didn't matter at the time, what mattered was security. So even if you have a dictator like Mobutu, the US would ally with them for their own national security reasons, for their own national interest. So it didn't matter. And in Congo, actually, where Mobutu was, the first prime minister of Congo, this guy, what's his name again? Lumumba. They killed Lumumba. Yeah. Can you imagine? They killed Lumumba. And these were actually leaders that were coming up together to become Africa's, let's say, vibrant and people that will bring prosperity and leadership to the continent. But they never prepared us. So again, forcing that kind of system to a people that you never prepared, you get it, to take up the leadership, I think it's going to be very challenging. Like democratization, the democratization process Desmond is talking about is actually what is existing. It's a sequence, it's a process that's actually happening. We are not yet democratic, I would say. Sometimes you would have democratic aspects within the people who want this. You get it, people want this. Even leaders, opposition parties would say, yeah, the current government is kind of suppressing us, we want them. But then when they become the leaders, they become dictators. You get it? So I think it's a very interesting case in Africa.
Thank you. My next question goes to Desmond. So do you think democracy or republic or monarchy or totalitarian or socialist state is better for Africa? And please, you could tell us why you think this is better for Africa.
Can I be honest?
Yes, completely.
Okay. For me, I think right now what Africa needs is a complete different system. Because when I look at all these systems that you've mentioned, you talk about, let's say, democracy, right? Democracy started, when we talk about democracy, we think they came up with this idea of leadership by the people, for the people, and everything. And it was those values that have now like built the Western world, right? We look at where Greece is now and what is happening to the West. I feel the whole system of democracy right now is a little bit flawed, and I feel that we cannot take that same template and apply it to Africa, because in the future it will also fail. So right now, honestly, I think we need a complete different system. It's not socialism, it's not republic, it's not, I don't know what it is, but all these systems have failed, and history can agree with me. So for Africa, I don't know.
Okay, thank you. That was quite a tough question, I would admit. And we're moving on to the next on the program. Well, you want to
Yeah,
add
what I want to add
Okay,
about
go
this.
ahead.
Yeah, Desmond talks about a new system. Perhaps the new system we are looking for is democracy in the African context. Democracy that fits our values, our norms as a people. You know, democracy that is in line with our spirit and the spirit of our forefathers who fought for us. You know, because yeah, of course, our destiny was taken away from us many years ago when we went through what do you call it, colonization. And just as Peter admitted, before when I was preparing to come here, I was just thinking, so were these people democratic in the first place? So because the practice, they subjected us to the most the most inhuman activity that has ever inhuman or called subjection that has ever been in the history of the world. Take away the entire destiny of people that kind of impose democracy on us when, like you said, we are not ready to accept it. So the fact is, we have to redefine our democracy. It pains very much that Ghana, the first country that gained independence and as a result started a democratic, became a republic in 1960. We are still using constitution that was made in 1982, and no significant review has been made on this constitution. And we use the same system that is alien to the African values, and that is why we cannot develop. You see, because the point is, whatever system that you are using to run your country determines the success of your people, determines the liberty, determines the standard of life of your people. And so the kind of democracy that we have, that has been instituted by the 1992 Constitution of Ghana, for instance, breeds corruption because it gives a lot of powers to the president. A lot of powers to the president. So much that the presidents appoint a whole lot of people to work with. You see, so the new system, Desmond, that you think we are looking for, of course, democracy is good. I'll go for democracy any day, because if nothing at all, it gives the people the right to ask questions to their leaders. But we should have a democracy in Africa where, for me, the members of parliament are not aligned with any political party. Because look at the three arms of government: the executive, legislative, and then the judiciary. Perhaps the most powerful is the legislative arm of government. Why am I saying this? It is only the legislative arm of government that vets and must approve basically people in the executive, apart from the president and the vice, and then also even the people in the judiciary. But the kind of system we are having has put in parliament people who have political affiliations, and they are supposed to represent the people, which is the true spirit of democracy, about representation, people being elected to represent. They go there and end up representing their political parties. So that is the system that we need. The African-oriented democracy. A totally different system. And I tell you, if any African country is bold enough to rewrite their constitution and make sure that nobody who has a political affiliation is being elected to parliament, we'll be amazed the kind of development that we're going to have.
Thank you.
Can I just to follow up?
Yeah, you
One of
can
the
go
things
ahead.
that he said. He mentioned something about our destiny being taken away from that. I don't agree with that, but I don't agree with that because I believe we still have destiny, right? What I would say maybe he wanted to say was our identity as Africans was taken away.
It's kind of our destiny.
Yeah. Our identity was taken away, but it's with democracy. I agree with what he's saying, and you can't really. I don't know the definition of democracy. People's definition of democracy. Is it how far you can push your government? Like, do we define democracy by how far we can push our governments to do the things that we want? Is that the real meaning of democracy, or how are we defining democracy in Africa? So if our definition of democracy is based on how far we can push the government to do the things that they're supposed to do, then yeah, I can agree with him. Then we can actually maybe sit down. Africa needs to sit down and find a way to work around that.
I see this, but as much as you're trying to put out the cons of democracy, do you think there are some pros to democracy?
Yeah, I feel that there is. I come from a very beautiful country in Southern Africa, which is which is Zambia. Zambia has had a very good democratic run compared to other African countries. But that doesn't mean that our democracy is perfect. Right now, our democracy is actually under threat because of some of the things that he mentioned, where you have the president having a lot of power. So we're seeing basically if there's a ruling party, they're in charge of the parliament, they're in charge of the executive, they're in charge of everything. So that to me is a threat to our democracy. But we're working around it, we'll see.
Thank you. The next question goes to Peter. Do you think that the shift towards electoral democracy, and before I throw that question, I will give you a template. After the fall of the Soviet Union, which was providing financial and military aid to some African countries in the fight for independence, most African countries like Zambia, which was a one-party state, opened up their electoral systems to other political parties. In Zambia, when President Kaunda did that, he lost the elections to the opposition. This question was supposed to get this, so I'll push it to this one. So the question is, do you think the shift towards electoral democracy and multi-party participation was the right thing to do? Could one man rule or one party rule have been better?
I'll go back to what I said, I think, during this discussion. I feel like when it comes to countries and leaders, there are three types of leaders. We have the prophets, we have the barbarians, and we have the technocrats. Kenneth Kaunda was a prophet. He got our independence, and when you are a prophet for a country, you think about what would go wrong and if your freedoms will be taken away from you again. So I feel maybe that was one of the reasons why those guys wanted to keep to the power and make sure that okay, there's no divisions amongst themselves and things like that, to ensure that there's no interference from the outside world. But then, of course, it happened in 1992. Yeah, he lost the election. I think we had Frederick Chiluba coming in. Frederick Chiluba was he's a technocrat anyway. Let's put him as a technocrat. So he came with all these systems, trying to put this in place. Let's have these institutions, this and that and that. That probably worked or did not work. But we went to Manawasa. He came with also a technocrat, trying to put things in place and things like that. And then we had Michael Chilufya-Sata, a barbarian. He came for corruption, fought against corruption and things like that. So for me, it's the whole system of democracy and multi-party electoral system. I feel like Yeah, it was very good for our democracy, Zambia to be specific. It was very, very important because if Kenneth Kaunda had gone, because he ruled the country for 27 years, had he gone for more than that, he would have maybe turned out to be Robert Mugabe. Who knows? So he's respected, he's honored in my country because yeah, he took that decision. Okay, let's have multi-party electoral system and things like that. Yeah.
Nice. So personally, you support
Yeah.
I want to add if
Okay.
one or two to this, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, the man that a lot of people respect across Africa because of his bold leadership in the fight for what do you call it, democracy and freedom in Ghana and then in Africa, wanted to establish a one-party state, and that was the beginning of his wars, because people were against it, and so they had to take him away, and then we went into the multi-party state, right? Multi-party electoral system. But the challenge with the multi-party system, at least with a good example from Ghana, is about sustainable development. Because the multi-party system has created a system which allows for different political parties to be elected into power. But when a new government comes, a new political party comes into power, they tend to stop the projects that were initiated by the previous government. And we don't have any national plan, anything that binds any new political party to say that when you come, you have to continue projects that have been initiated by the former government. So for me, one-party state and multi-party state will have to be looked into very, very critically. Either if you go into multi-party state, we should increase the term of governance for example, 4 years is not enough time to do most of the things that you want to do as a president, because most likely in the first year you're trying to put your systems in place, you have just second year, third year, in the fourth year you're going for elections, right? So if you're going to have, if you're going to make sure that multi-party system works in Africa, then perhaps we should think of increasing the term of office. For me, I've always proposed that, for example, in Ghana, we could just have 6 years of a term, and just for one term. So I become president, I rule for 6 years, I go and I don't come again. Then my ideologies, because political parties is about ideologies, then I'll be able to sufficiently implement my ideologies within that space of time. Otherwise, this thing of multi-party system, which ensures that we are changing constantly, as you've seen in most, at least in Ghana, since 1992, it just brings up these things, and you have a government starting a project very nicely, then the government goes out, a new government comes, stops the project, and starts a new one again, all over again. A critical example: affordable housing. The government, since I think 2000 or 2004, decided that okay, we're going to go into building of housing for Ghanaians. Although they call it affordable, but sometimes when you quote the price, you realize that it's not really affordable. But the first government that started couldn't finish. He left office. Another government came, abandoned it, started his own. He didn't finish, left office. Another government came, abandoned it, and he started his own. Not only affordable housing, hospitals, schools. You see.
So you're saying offices should be 6 years maximum?
Yes, that is if you want to make sure that the multi-party system is really working, then we should give them the time.
Okay.
To
but according to the democracy concept, an individual is liable to run for 2 terms, 8 years maximum. Isn't that going to go against democracy if it is adopted?
Yeah, that goes back to having the African-oriented democracy.
Okay.
Democracy that fits us as people. Democracy that fits our spirit, like I said, and the kind of things that we want to do. The African is a resilient person. The African person wants to do something. The African wants somebody to see what he is doing. And if you want to ensure that then we have to design a system that fits us and not go for this 4 year system that has never worked for us and is never going to work. Listen, if you don't change the foundations, you know, if you don't change the foundations, every other thing that we do are cosmetics and they want to work. And the foundation is a constitution.
Okay, so just to add to what you said, let's imagine an individual who was in office for 4 years, and that's it, right? For citizens, if the individual is going for the second term, a citizen knows if he's going to vote for this individual based on the performances. I think 4 years is maybe reasonable enough to decide whether this guy is in the position to run for the second term. So imagine if this person ran for 6 years and they did nothing. So that means the citizens would have to endure 2 more years of suffering. Isn't it reasonable for the person to run for 4 years instead of 6 years?
You see, one I think wrong concept we have about democracy and everything is just democracy begins at elections and ends at elections. I don't think that citizens will have to just go vote on December 7th, 2020, and just wait again to go and exercise their democratic right in December 7th, 2024. You see, that is why the system creates for impeachment of the president. But as it stands now, with the system that we have, I was very surprised to see that any African president has been impeached by the parliament, because the system gives a lot of powers to the president, and the system pushes politically oriented people into the parliament. So that 6 years is workable, and in my candid opinion, it is what we need as a president. But then also, if you want to have an assessment, we could say, look, you have 6 years. At the end of the fourth year, you're going to have referendum, and that referendum is going to assess your performance. If you have the referendum, a lot of people are saying yes, you should continue for the next 2 years. You continue. If the referendum says you cannot continue, you step aside, and we will not pay you any ex gracias and what have you. If you're not able to spend the 6 years, then we are not going to give you those entitlements. If you do that, people will come with the mindset of working for the people. See, Africa, I've first talked about decent lives. People need decent lives. It is not just about having beautiful places like we see in this country and then in other developed countries, but create a decent lives for the people. Decent transport system, decent markets, so that people will feel that they are humans.
Yeah.
Like we discussed in education the other time, very inhuman treatment given to kids, and all these come back to the kind of democracy we are practicing, which has given birth to the constitutions that we use across the continent.
Thank you.
Can I say something?
We can come back to that. Yeah. For the next question, I would quickly go through statistics, and this is directed to Peter. According to the Freedom House Democracy Index 2023, the only 3 countries in Africa are Cape Verde, Ghana, Lesotho, Mauritius, Namibia, Seychelles, South Africa, Sao Tome, and Principe. The rest are either partly free or not free. Now, Rwanda today is rated not free by the Freedom House, given the history and difficult past the country experienced 30 years ago, and the president's decision to curb certain rights of its citizens. They are living well enough, given the economic advancement in a short time. Now the question is Kagame, the president of Rwanda, justified in curbing certain freedoms and maintaining power for as long as Rwandans continue to prosper and live in peace?
A straightforward answer is that yeah, it's justified. Because what is the purpose, of leading a country or adopting a certain political system? Because you have to see, like, what good, what benefit does it bring to the people? So is Kagame being in power since he picked up Rwanda from the rebels after the genocide justified? Because today Rwanda is one of the fastest growing economies, not only in Africa, but in the world. So if the Rwandans want him to be there for as long as they want, he should be there. Again, this relates to term limits, term limits that we've been talking about. Actually, usually this is just arbitrary, that a country that should have a presidential system should have only term limits. It's just people that decide that. Even in America, it is not statutory that the president has to serve 2 terms. It is only accepted that the president has to serve 2 terms. Roosevelt, the American president, during the when the Second World War started, won 3 or 4 consecutive elections. 3 or 4, the longest serving American president. He died, that was why. He didn't continue. Even if he didn't die, he would have won again because he was good and the Americans loved him. Yeah. So I think the same applies to Africa. Whether 6 or 4 years, it depends on the people and the progress that president has actually made. Like you said, 6 years and then you start some projects, someone will come and then cut them off, start again. Because in Africa, we do not have, I would say, institutional memory.
Yeah.
But 4 or 6 years should be very short to call it institutional memory. When a president leaves a project behind, that should be fresh enough for the new incoming president to take up. But again, because we are party oriented, you mentioned there's a lot of things that have been talked about here that I would try to bite them in a very, talk about them in a very short.
Just make it brief, because there is one question that I want everyone to contribute.
All right.
Yeah,
all right.
we don't have much time left.
All right. So the party system, again, we don't have party systems in Africa before the introduction of party systems by the West. In Africa, pre-colonial Africa, the systems we had were what? Consensus building, not about parties, not about winning. It's not a zero-sum game wherein the winner takes it all. It was about consensus. Leaders would come, elders would come and then gather and discuss matters. And they have to talk until all of them agree. If there's anyone who disagrees, they have to still continue talking. That's consensus. But today, it's about winning. So political parties would come with that mentality. And we've kind of in fact, added this tribalistic kind of agenda on it. Certain political parties kind of aligned to certain tribes. When they come, they are only looking at what benefits their tribe or maybe their religion. So that's problematic. And parliamentarianism again. Today we have what parliaments. In most countries, it's bicameral. You have the upper house, you have the lower house, right? And in my country, all of them are elected, except let's a few number like 5 who are usually appointed, selected by the president. You get it. But in Africa, we didn't have that. You can see our advisors. You can see our advisors as the parliament, and nobody voted them because they were elders. So they come into the system to decide matters. But today we have the party system. But when you look at Britain, for example, they have a parliament, right? They have the lower house, the House of Commons, and they have the House of Lords. But the House of Lords, nobody elects them. It's the upper house, but nobody elects them. The House of Lords, the members are actually chosen by the Queen. You get it? The House of Commons, they are chosen by the people. Can we have that kind of system in Africa? Because Britain is a constitutional monarchy. Talking about what kind of system suits Africa, I would go for constitutional monarchy, wherein we can have a monarch, but still his or her powers can be limited by a constitution, can be limited by whether those limits will be derived from the House of Commons, a parliament. I'm not sure about that. It could be like advisors, but still we can have a monarch that their powers can be limited.
Thank you. This is going to be the last question, and I want everyone to say something about it. It's the top of the cake. If you had to choose, which African country would you choose as a beacon of hope to formulate and institutionalize a political system rooted in African values, culture, history, and time in the world? And what would you call that political system? Briefly, for just 2 minutes in anything.
This
this question is heavy.
Yeah.
It's heavy because okay.
And
Can
please,
Peter start, please?
All right, let me go. Let me go.
before you start,
Uh-huh.
let's be honest, like
Uh-huh.
completely. You're from
Yeah.
Gambia,
Yeah.
and you can choose other countries,
Yeah.
and you can tell us
No,
why.
actually, my country is not the best example, to be frank. Gambia is not the best example. I mean, right now, you have a good president, but I think he's already started abusing his power. I would choose Rwanda. By Western standards, by Western democratic standards, Rwanda is an autocratic state. But the president, like, wields a lot of power, he does whatever he wants, silences people. But we have that, Rwanda has that for a reason, because one is because of the history of Rwanda, where Kagame picked up that country from, when within 100 days, 800,000 people were killed. Were slaughtered, like butchered. Now someone, 30 years fast forward, brought up that country from that rubble to become one of the shining lights of Africa. I think he has to be commended. But again, I think that the kind of system is actually, could be, I would say, is maybe linked to developmental democracy. It can be democracy where we will have electoral democracy. By the way, in most African countries, what we have is electoral democracy. It's not actually democratic Western democracy. It's just electoral. We go to elections and then that's it. But in Rwanda, it's a development that's linked to democracy. So what takes precedence here is the development. If we are actually developing, there are no reports that Rwandans are complaining or people are like out in the streets complaining. No, because what? People have money in their pockets. The economy is advancing. The cities are clean. You have efficient water supply, electricity supply. If you have that kind of leader who can curb certain rights, of the people, but just still the greater good. In fact, Westerners, I don't want to say this out loud. The kind of the democracy should serve the greater good. It's at the same time one of the critics of democracy, because democracy itself. By the way, let me just tell you as a side note, the American founding fathers never intended to establish a democracy in America. They intended to establish a republic. James Madison, coming out in one of their meetings, journalists asked him, what system have you brought us? He said, a republic if you can keep it. So it's not actually a democracy. It's actually because democracy is what majority rule. So wherever the majority rules, the minority suffers. So we're like, no, we have to have a republic where we have representatives that are going to serve as a check on the majority. Okay. So in Africa, I would choose Rwanda, where it will have a strong leader that will make sure that we provide all the needs of the people, the greater good of the majority of the people, but at the same time respecting the plight of the minority. Not Western, it could be African, like you said, either African, but again, Africa has to choose. Nobody has to choose for Africa, whether French, whether Chinese democracy, whether Russian democracy, whether American. It is the Africans that have to choose their own way of living, their own political system, and not anybody else.
Thank you, Peter. So Rwanda, because the president has shown to be capable of doing such things.
I was praying you go to heaven.
See you soon.
All right. So for me, I wanted to go for Zambia, but then our democracy is also under question. Like it's a question mark. But I would go for Rwanda.
Mm-hmm.
But what I would not agree with the Rwandan system is the term limit for the president, because I look at Rwanda in the next 50 years, right? Is Paul Kagame going to be there? No. What is going to happen when they don't have a leader of his caliber? So what I would agree with Rwanda is, yes, right now you have a president that is getting the job done, but the country has to think what will happen the next 20, 30, 40 years. So the leadership that we need in Africa is leadership that can be passed on. If you're a leader and you are the only one who can get the job done, then you're not a leader. In my opinion, the politics that we have, especially in my country, is for lack of a better term, I would describe it like, when there is this saying that when donkeys fight, when donkeys are fighting the enemy, they face the enemy and then kick themselves to death. But when horses fight, they face each other and kick the enemy to death. But that's the political atmosphere in my country. It's like each political party is looking at it's like the UPND look at the Patriotic Front as their enemy. No, that's not their enemy. The enemy is the level of poverty in the country, the economy, all of that. But with Rwanda, their system, like you of course they'll be the West is going to say that they of course they these questions of human rights and things like that, but they're getting the job done. You understand? So for the unity of the country and for other things, for me, I'll pick Rwanda. People have to really learn the system that they have and polish it. Of course, it has its own ups and downs, so make it better.
Thank you so much. So, even I'm ready.
Yeah, I'm ready now.
Okay.
But
How about it?
I'm nervous because I'm going to choose my country as a beacon of hope for the future of Africa and for that matter democracy.
Also, what do you
Yeah, because Barack Obama, when he came to Ghana, I think somewhere in 2008 or 2010, yeah, in delivering a speech in our parliament, said what Africans need is not strong people. What we need are strong institutions. And I think that of late, I'm really happy that people have been raising, and as a matter of fact, the young people in Ghana have been raising serious issues about the constitution. And perhaps a lot of people, a lot of Ghanaians will share in my view that we need a total review of the constitution and make sure that, like I said, parliamentarians are not affiliated to any political parties. And because young people like myself have this strong stance on this issue, we have the hope that one day, when we take the realms of affairs of the country, we are going to change the face of democracy in Ghana. And trust me, if we are able to do that and champion this cause, and as destiny has bestowed on us to be the first democratic, the first independent country in sub-Saharan Africa, we will be the first, again, country in the sub-Saharan African region to institute the African-based democracy. So it is possible. Ghanaians can do it. And we can do it because over the years, like I said, attention has been drawn on building of institutions. We want our institutions to work. And for the institutions to work, we have to ensure that there is a lot of checks and balances. So these are just some few things, little things that we just need the political will to be able to do. And once we do that, everything is going to be all right. So yes, Ghana's democracy has been improving, and almost every year we get better in our democratic dispensations and then in our democratic developments. So it is possible that in future, maybe in 20, 30 years, a new African development will be born in Ghana. Thank you.
And then it spreads.
And spread across.
That is a great spread. Does anyone have anything to contribute to that?
We go.
Yeah, for me, I agree with. No, I like the fact that he likes his country, Ghana. But then for me, it's like Ghana was the first country to gain independence. So they spearheaded independence in Africa, and where we are now, we would actually go back to Ghana. So we cannot trust them again with the future prospect of democracy. No, we cannot give them that that power. Their democracy is good. Yeah, their democracy is good. But like I said in the beginning, it's all cosmetic. At democracy, there's a lot that has to be done. But yeah, they're trying.
Thank you very much. Thank you all once again. I know if we keep going on and on about this, we're not going to. And I'm so sorry, but we are short on time. Thank you very much once again. And we are very glad for this opportunity. We are glad we have you as Africans. We are glad for your passion and burning fire for Africa, and we hope to see more of this. We are indeed honored to have you today on the show. On this note, we have come to the end of today's episode. Do you feel it beats differently? This is going to the online viewers. Do you feel it beats differently than when you started this video? I mean, if you feel like you have, and if you're asked to briefly describe the old and the new political systems in Africa, you could say one or two things. Then you're in the right place, and your time was worth it today. So we want to appreciate our viewers online, home and abroad. Stay tuned for the subsequent episodes. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.
Cool.
Hello guys, we just concluded the first episode of Bantaba. If you're watching this video, it means you already know how it went. I can bet you had a great time. We will be here next week, same time, same venue. Stay tuned. It's your favorite host, Christina. Bye.